Hey everybody, Diggs here. It's another beautiful day out here in the Pacific Northwest. Today we are going to be talking about the Pixel Remastered version of Final Fantasy 1. We're going to be talking about all of the extra features that do come with it, and then we're going to specifically talk about the pixel artwork itself, the comparison to the other versions of Final Fantasy 1, along with a talk about the gameplay. Let's go ahead and dig in. Probably one of the most interesting aspects of this is that you do get a whole bunch of extras with this version of Final Fantasy 1. These extras carry through in all the other Pixel remasters. You get a bestiary, and the bestiary is very standard, very normal. I mean, this is what you would expect, right? You get a gallery, which has all of the amazing pieces of art that you may have never seen. Just going through it, I was able to find, for example, battling the Kraken, battling the Ochu. These are Final Fantasy 1 pieces of art that I have never seen before. The Flying Fortress is so incredible. It's just one of these things that adds an extra layer to this version of the game that other versions of the game do not have. One of the last things this game has, which truly sets it fully apart from the other remasters of Final Fantasy 1 over the years, is the music. And the music has been completely redone by Nobuo himself, and it has replaced the game music in its entirety. It really gives it a fresh experience, and it evokes sort of this new feeling. It's hard to describe when you're playing through a Final Fantasy that you played through 4 or 5 times, and the music and the feelings that it evokes from you are more powerful than it ever has been in the past. It's a very, I don't even know how to fully describe the experience. I look at, Pixel Remaster 1, 2, and 3, the enhanced music just seems to get better because Final Fantasy music gets better as it progresses. And I just wonder how powerful of an experience the Pixel Remaster for 6 will be when it comes out, if this is just the foundational Pixel Remaster 1 music. So definitely lots to kind of take in here. And if you are a Final Fantasy player looking for a fresh experience or a fresh take on Final Fantasy 1, this would be the version for you. Now, if you are a newer player to the Final Fantasy franchise, I would actually encourage this version for newer players as well, because this version of Final Fantasy 1 is actually more accessible and it's a little bit easier. You can see kind of as I played through the game, the AI has been updated. You're not going to get in a situation where like whites are going to nonstop paralyze you and murder you. You're going to have access to items that were never previously in Final Fantasy 1, like Phoenix Downs, like Ethers. Like, these are things that were never present in Final Fantasy 1 previously that they have added to the game to make it an easier experience. They've also turned down, from my feeling, just through playing this game and having played the PSP version of the game probably about a year ago, they've turned down the monster encounter rate, which makes some of those 6th floor dungeons that can be really grueling, especially I think about the Earth Cave that you have to go back to twice and is like 6 floors deep. It makes those dungeons a lot less of a crawl and a grind or a stopping point, right? Where you're like, oh no, I have to go back to this dungeon and I have to do it again. Now, I know there's going to be the purists for Final Fantasy 1 players out there that are like, oh, we want the original difficult experience, and you can still get that. You can go play other versions of the game. I think this version of the game is trying to be authentic to the NES version in terms of the feelings that it evokes. It's trying to bring new players into the franchise, and I think it does that very successfully. Now, talking about the sprite work, right? Because this is the quote-unquote pixel remaster. I actually think the sprite work is very authentic to Final Fantasy 1, the original NES version. You can see they actually have a version of the game which I prefer to play on, but my viewers prefer not to watch on, where you can actually put the CRT lines on it, where it does kind of adjust the screen so that you kind of look like you're playing on one of these older televisions, and it feels really good. It actually, as someone who is an older person that has played all the previous Final Fantasies on like a television that had a pull knob. it actually feels very authentic, and I just love the aesthetic. Now, there is something to be said when you're comparing the sprite work though to the PSP version of the game that has recently released a couple years ago that I played last year. I do think the sprite work from the PSP version of the game does look better, and I think they could have used the PSP sprite work, or maybe had an option to toggle the sprite work in, would have been wonderful. But if we're looking at a comparison to the original NES version of the game, this is significantly more authentic to the original NES version. And that's going to be a theme that seems to be carrying through all of the Pixel remasters as I have been playing through them. I'm currently about halfway through the second one right now. It seems that they are more focused on being authentic to the original game than the additional content that has been added since then. So for example, there is no additional dungeons in this game, there's no additional post-game content, and the same is for Final Fantasy II. You get to Chaos, you beat Chaos, that is the end of the game. And there's an aspect to that that I really enjoy, especially since I have actually played through the additional content for Final Fantasy I, and it was literally just feeling like a grind fest. There's also an aspect to that where I wish I had access to that content. As a whole product though, I do think it is better than the PSP version, but I wonder what's going to happen when we get to later versions of the game. I'm particularly interested in Final Fantasy III because we've never really had a pixelated version of Final Fantasy III released in the West, and I'm really interested in comparing the 3D version of it to the other versions that are going to be included. Now, in terms of criticism for this game, I do have a few things, and they are mostly around the auto combat system and the sprite work, so to say, for the magic and combat abilities. And my criticism is that when you do have an auto battle feature, the auto battle feature will only use the last ability that you used. That's okay. The problem though, when it comes to the sprite work, is that the sprite work is reused, and that is really killer for me. That is something where when I started playing Final Fantasy II, I was expecting different sprite work, and what I got is, you'll see the white mage casting Protect here. The sprite work from Final Fantasy II is exactly the same sprite work as what's in Final Fantasy I right now. And I know that's an aesthetic that was different in the original versions, and I'm a little cautious going forward and a little worried that when I get to Final Fantasy III, it's going to be the same animation for Fire 3, for example, than what I played in Final Fantasy I. There is also a way that this could be a good thing, depending on how it's implemented in terms of the next 6 remasters, right? You could look at it from one perspective as lazy coding or lazy pixel design. You could also look at it as adding a consistency to the rest of the game, so that, you know, people who are jumping between 1, 2, 3, and 4, they look at that spell and they're like, okay, that's the spell that I used that really kicked some ass in Final Fantasy 1, right? So I'm kind of waiting as I'm playing through 2 and 3 to see whether or not that pixel work was truly lazy, or if it's just something that they're being consistent. One thing I would have wished with that though is if they were doing that, they would have been more consistent with the naming of the spells. For example, in Final Fantasy I, it's Fire, Fyra, Firaga, and then in Final Fantasy II, it's Fire 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you are thinking about it right, I kind of wish they would have kept the names consistent, and it's something, you know, I think it would be nice across the entire Final Fantasy franchise, but it's just one of those little details where, as someone who has played this a lot, I really do find it to be just one of those things I think about. Finally, we do have some changes to the actual graphical maps, and what you're seeing here is actually the entrance to the Chaos Shrine, and it actually, the pixelated changes to the maps themselves are so incredible. It really reminds me, the detail in this really reminds me of what we used to see with Lufia, actually. If any of you have ever played Lufia 2, there's very detailed sprite work. It's a Super Nintendo game, and this really feels almost superior to the Lufia 2 sprite work in many good ways. There's environmental effects, there's other things going on, and probably one of my favorite features that happens is that you do have access to a fully redone, beautiful map, which does have the treasure chests on it. So you will be able to see where the treasure chests are. You no longer have to look up a map online, which, let's be honest, if you're going through that Earth Shrine and you're getting lost and you're just like, where am I going? Being able to just pop up the map like that is absolutely incredible. While we're talking about the map as well, there is a world map which has been redone in the sense that it's easier to navigate on a global scale. It shows you what treasure chests you're missing, so that if you are wanting to 100% the game, you can actually go through and see what treasure chests you missed. It just makes, you know, the things where, you know, gathering all of the treasure chests to get that platinum or whatever it is can be really frustrating. It's all provided for you right here. Anyway, everybody, I hope this guide kind of helped you, kind of introduced you to the first of the Pixel Remaster series. I'm going to be doing Final Fantasy 2 and 3. Final Fantasy 4 will be releasing here on the 19th of August, and I will definitely be covering that as well. I'm also streaming these games currently, so if you do want to see me streaming these, we are doing 100% playthrough, 100% achievement. I would love to see you guys on stream joining me for that. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. Again, if you have questions, drop them down in the comment section down below. If there's something else you want me to cover, or I forgot something regarding these Pixel remasters, definitely drop it down in the comment section down below. Also, I am curious if you would want to do a art review video where we do just do a video going through the art and showcasing how beautiful the Final Fantasy 1 art really is. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.